Hi, and welcome back to The Rotation. I'm your co-host, Jordan.
And I'm Rainey. Today we have the absolute honor of sitting down with someone whose impact on the LMU community is both deep and wide-reaching. We're joined by Dean Bryant Keith Alexander, Dean of the LMU College of Communication and Fine Arts. Dean Alexander is not only a leader in the academic space, but also a professor of communication, performance, gender, queer, and cultural studies, an affiliate faculty member in the Educational Leadership for Social Justice doctoral program at LMU School of Education, an affiliate faculty in the Sir Zelman Cohen School of Music at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and that's just to name a few of his many roles. We are so excited to have him here with us today to dive into his incredible journey, his career, and of course all things communication and fine arts at LMU.
We're gonna real quick go around and introduce the Rotation, the podcast that we are on. So like I said, I'm Jordan.
I'm Anna.
I'm Lauren.
I'm Christian.
I'm Maya.
I'm Regina. I'm Skyla.
I'm Rainey.
And let's get into the conversation.
Welcome, first of all.
Thank you.
First question is very simple. How's your day been and how are you feeling right now?
Okay, so my day has been a little crazy. I'm just going to be very direct with all of you. early morning meetings. Then I had to drive to Pasadena for a dental appointment.
That was fun.
Pasadena's
And I'm
horrible.
saying that because I'm here with you right now, because I'm interested in both your questions, but also this process of critical engagement with your guests. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Thank you.
being here. On that same note, what are you expecting from this session?
My general approach to the idea of podcasts, right, is often a kind of intimate discussion about things that matter to the individuals who are asking the questions, and certainly, that matter to the individuals who are the narrators or the interviewees, right? And so I'm always interested in a good conversation, right? And so I'm expecting you to give me a good conversation.
And we'll try our best, definitely.
No pressure there.
On that same note, because you do love a good conversation, I'm assuming that you take your time to listen to them. Do you listen to podcasts? Or do you have any favorite podcasts?
I actually don't have a favorite podcast. I mean, whenever I have an opportunity to listen to them, I'm intrigued because it's almost like being a voyeur, right? Right? Someone who's sort of listening to private conversations unfolding in front of you, right? And relative to the nature of what the subject matter is, I find myself being drawn into the intimacies of the discovery of what's happening.
That's very interesting, and it made me remind of, we study what soundscapes are, and a little bit of what you're talking about, depending on like where you're sitting, the context, it can be thought of as soundscapes, but a lot of the times it can also be like nature that you surround yourself every day, but you don't notice it, or you're not too like aware of it. So if you could like choose like a soundscape specifically that you could like fall asleep to, or that makes you relax, like you had like a long day already, so if you had to like unwind, what is like a soundscape or a sound that will like ground you again and relax you?
And I wish that I had some very impressive and sophisticated response to that, right? And in my home I have a series of sound machines, right, that are designed in some ways to really distract me from the reality of my thoughts. Right, and some of that is, rain and different kinds of things that are programmed in there. But the reality is that I find myself getting home sometimes and turning on what I call nonsense television, right? And things that I've recorded and things that I've heard over and over and over again, like old episodes of The Golden Girls, right? Even old episodes of like RuPaul's Drag Race, right? That I've seen and heard over and over and over again. So it provides a kind of soundscape, as you say, a kind of background, right, of activity that I don't have to focus in on in critical kind of ways, but provides me a kind of space of possibility. Even sometimes when I'm sitting at my computer working, there's a familiar narrative playing off in the background. And let me tell you where I think a part of that comes from for me. I'm number 5 of 7 children, right? And so there was always sound in the house. There was always somebody's business being spilled, right? Something going on, no matter what part of the house that I was in. And so growing up with that, it has actually become a critical part of my process of meaning making in the everyday life. So I put on that familiar narrative, right? I put on the radio, I put on something that provides the backdrop that still allows me to focus in on whatever I'm working on at that moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think throughout our coursework, we've actually talked a lot about how we can find comfort within sound and the familiarity of your mom singing you a lullaby when you're younger. Or we talked a lot about, we did an activity where we had to walk across the LMU campus and record sounds and analyze the soundscape and how it made us feel, and why is it that we don't usually notice the different sounds that are going on at LMU. And it made me notice that I am personally very comforted by the sound of the water fountain and the sound of the people on the edge chattering and the sound of people sitting in sunken gardens and all those different things, because it makes me feel like I'm part of a community here at LMU.
Nice.
And so I'm honestly, like, with that same kind of thing, how do you feel like the soundscape of LMU almost speaks to the campus culture?
I actually think they're one and the same. I mean, I think that the life of the campus is made manifest in not only people moving about, going about their business, but the sounds that they make. I have the pleasure of having my office in St. Robert's Hall, and I hear the chapel bells ringing, right? And it punctuates time for me, right? But it also sort of signifies the role of the chapel, right, of church, of religiosity within the mission statement of this campus. And so there are so many other sounds, and particularly the ones that you just outlined, which is the sounds of students talking in the hallway, the sound of students walking through St. Robert's Hall, the sounds of students stomping up the stairs in that building, right? That's the life of the building, and it's the life of the campus. And there's this definite interconnection between sound and community, just like sound and home, in ways that reinforce both place and space. And we make a distinction, of course, between place and space, one being, let's call it location, and the other one are the practices that signify activities within that location. And it's the difference between what happens in a classroom versus what happens in your living room. Right? The nature of those exchanges, those sounds, those social relational activities mark where you are in the moment. And in some ways, how you are located within that set of sounds and activities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Bouncing off of that, community is like a big thing. So like how has like community played a role in the journey of like where you are now?
Well, so community is everything. When we were all separated because of the COVID virus, right? And we were all relegated to the privacy of our home spaces. There were so many students and faculty and staff who were yearning for community. And one of the things that I was very curious about is what is it that they were yearning for? Not just the co-presence of people within place. They were yearning for some other relational kind of piece, something that made sense to them, that gave them a sense of belonging. And I started to remind people that community is not place, but it's space. And community is what we make it to be. So just returning to campus doesn't necessarily bring you back to community. What are our roles and responsibilities in building and maintaining community? And so I made these lapel pins. I should have worn one today. I even had like Zoom backgrounds that had community in the middle of a circle. And then the circumference of the circle said communication, collaboration, cooperation, coordination, which I think are all the factors that help us to build and maintain community. We have a role to play. And so I'm interested in the ways in which we think and feel about community. And so my second part of that is I just came back from a conference called the Black Queer Studies Conference. It was held on the campus of UNC, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And it was the 25th anniversary of this conference. Okay? Now, I'm telling my age here, right? I was a presenter at that conference 25 years ago. So it was this kind of reunion, right? And so when I entered that space, I felt like home. I felt like community, right? Because there were a lot of folks that looked like me in a wide variety of ways, right? Whose politics were in alignment with me, who spent a lot of time sort of articulating and interrogating aspects of their identities around the intersections of race and sexuality and gender. And the conversation was rich. It filled the entire room. And I felt like home, and I felt like community. not necessarily sort of safe space, because there's always this misnomer that home is a safe space, that community is a safe space. Heck no. I think home and community are spaces where people call you out, where they critique aspects of belonging and culture and identity, but they do it in a way with a hug, right, with an embrace. They do it in a way that is designed to help you be the best version of yourself within community. And so I just felt like enveloped in love in that community, which is somehow how I often feel at LMU. Not always, but the idea of being in a place where you can both be comfortable but also interrogate the things that matter, that make you you, and make you a part of a larger collective of individuals with common mission, goals, and potentials. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How do you take that kind of like realization and learnings, and how do you see within your role as Dean of CFA those kinds of passions and values reflected in your work?
You know, I think it's everything. I think it's everything. So I'm in my 13th year as the Dean of the College of Communication and Fine Arts. And I'm always in the process of trying to reinforce what community looks like, what ties us together in meaningful kind of ways. So in CFA, you know, we have a Department of Communication Studies, but we also have theater and dance and music, right, and art history, and a department in marital and family therapy with a specialization in art therapy. And so I'm always asking people, how do we build a community both in our differences, right, but in our sameness? Always trying to draw a line of the things that connect us in terms of, I often say, communication as art and art as communication. Both critical processes of sense making and expression, and sharing our attitudes, beliefs, and values with others in meaningful, cooperative, and collaborative ways. For me, that's about building community in my work as a dean, but also in my function as an administrator within the overall university. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank
You
you
touched
so
on your
much.
time at Chapel Hill a little bit, but I'm curious to hear about, you know, the sense of community you talked about with your 6 siblings, the sense of community you talked about at Chapel Hill. What has that looked like over time? What has the development of that looked like from your time as a young boy to where you are now?
My time as a young boy was just a couple of years ago. You know, so here's the reality. The reality is that we are always and already developing and evolving, right? The question often for me is, what are the distinct aspects of our identity that we capitalize on and grow, not just individually, but in relation to other people? My relationship with my siblings has had everything to do with the person that I am. The good, the bad, the ugly. My relationship with my colleagues at that conference in Chapel Hill has had everything to do with me. I could show you scars, right, of deep critical engagement, of critique, of being called out, but in ways that actually make me so much better as a teacher, as an artist, as a scholar, as a man, as a black gay man, to call into attention those things that matter to me and how I carry myself in the world, right? And the same thing happens to me in the community that is LMU, where we negotiate and we grapple with the deep and most important issues that matter, with the hope that we are all better for the struggle and the fight. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a short ad break and then go right into it afterward. And welcome back. Right before that ad break, Dean Alexander was telling us a little bit about how community is defined to him and how he grapples with his own personal values and how that fits into the LMU community. So we're gonna get right back into it. I think, Maya, if you have something to say.
Yeah, I kind of just want to go back to when you mentioned earlier the importance of community and also within communications, but also all the aspects of fine arts. I thought it was really interesting that my first ever interaction with you was sitting behind you at the freshman spring dance concert, and the kind of look the entire dance department had when you were there, that all of my friends within it were like, Dean Alexander's here, and we were all talking about you with such admiration of you always being there to support the fine arts. And within the kind of just intensity of community and really respecting and acknowledging people of every major background, etc., and all of the work that you've done within your life, I wanted to ask just genuinely, what did initially draw you to LMU, and how has your experience here shaped who you are, your perspective on education, or whatever else you see fit?
Oh, that's a great question, right? So let me just kind of play with a couple of things that you said. And there's a dance concert that's starting tonight that's running through the weekend. That's just so here's a couple of things, right? I attend those events not out of responsibility or chore as a dean, but out of a deep care and respect and appreciation for student work, for faculty work, for the artistry that is at play. And I'm glad to know that students appreciate that. But at those events, I'm also fully alive and fully present in myself, meaning that I'm there as an active audience member. I'm there to celebrate the work, but also to critique the work, and also to take the work deep, absorb the work, right? Particularly at dance concerts as well, whereas there are some audience members who are there to see the pretty aesthetic of dance, of movement, the spectacle of movement, right? And I'm there to see that, but I'm also there to see the argument that dance makes. I'm there to look at dance as a technology of knowing and showing and inviting audiences into the nature of what the purpose is of that dance, which is not just the beauty aesthetic, right, but it's that argument there. But let me get back to the real question. One of the reasons why I came to LMU, in a very practical kind of way, I was looking for a position to serve as a dean. And I actually interviewed at 5 or 6 different places, and I had 5 or 6 different interviews, right? Which meant that I also had a choice. And then I had to kind of figure out, beyond serving as a dean, what else was I looking for? It wasn't just the administrative position. It was a place where I could sort of be fully alive in all aspects of who I am, including, as my mother would say, a relatively good Catholic boy. And my mother used that phrase both as a critique and a ticklish little moment of play. The good Catholic girl that she would celebrate the fact that I'm a dean at a Catholic university. But the good Catholic girl that she would also critique always aspects of my gay identity and sexuality. So that relatively good part was her playful moment that we would laugh and we would giggle about. But the idea of being at Loyola Marymount University as a dean in the fullness of who I am was actually an invitation for me to explore aspects of faith and who I am in the fullness of my identity, not parceling things out, not bracketing things off from each other, but finding that place. And the word intersectionality has been used several times here, which is that complex nexus of who I am and those multiple variables that impact my sense of purpose in the world. And so working at state universities for many, many years, the idea of the separation of church and state became increasingly challenging for me in times when I wanted to talk about faith, when I wanted to talk about religion and religiosity and Catholicity. Times when my students wanted to talk about that, but there was always gatekeepers in the classroom that said, you can't talk about that. This is a state university. So when I was making the comparison and contrast between the multiple options in terms of serving as a dean, I thought, this is an opportunity for me, for personal growth, not just to serve as a dean, but to serve as a Black, gay, Catholic dean at a Jesuit university. And then to kind of figure out what in the heck would that look like and feel like, right? And it's been absolutely wonderful. I'm in my 13th year of playing and exploring and unpacking and teasing at the intersectional aspects of my identity, not teasing apart, not to separate, but to kind of poke and examine how they press up against each other in meaningful and significant kind of ways, and helping students who are also exploring what are perceived sometimes as tensions to recognize that there is a tensiveness, a relationality. I use the word tensive as opposed to tension, because I think tension is about forces that are struggling in relation to each other, right? Tensiveness are those things that hold us in relation to each other. Like two pieces of a magnet, sometimes, you know, you hold two pieces of a magnet and they seem to be both repelling and attracting at the same time. I love that space. I think we live in that space, always and already attracting and opposing, but creating a dialogue between each other. LMU has allowed me to do that in so many different aspects of my life that actually reunifies all the things that make me, me.
So you kind of touched on it within your personal experience and your personal identity, the relationship between going to a Jesuit institution or working at a Jesuit institution and having your queer identity. It is commonly known LMU has a very large queer community here on campus, and they're very loud in a good way, obviously, about their identities, and we have our Lavender Commencement, we have our LGBTQIA organizations and all that great stuff. We were actually, fun fact guys, one of the first Jesuit institutions to ever have LGBTQIA services, so very proud of that. But I'm wondering, how do you think LMU as a Jesuit institution and with Catholicism having the history that it does with the LGBT community, how do you think LMU kind of sets itself apart to be inclusive and accepting of that community specifically? And what do you think we can do in the future to further make them feel comfortable here on campus?
That's good, that's good. I think that my response is really going to key into the mission of the university. There's that element of the mission of the university that says that we have a commitment to the service of faith and the promotion of justice. That is the element of the LMU mission that makes all things possible. It is the umbrella on which we all live. It is the ways in which we motivate and work towards social justice for all. And so while I think there is a clear presence at LMU for queer communities, and I'm going to use that as a plural, I think that we have ongoing work to do about what does that mean within the framework of, and if I may use this phrase, diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. It's an ongoing project of interrogating what does that mean in the dailiness of our encounters with each other. That's not a critique of who we are. In fact, the campus I think just past weekend hosted the sort of a gathering of queer students and staff from AJCU universities around the country. And that was a phenomenal sort of outpouring of both love and acceptance and welcome, but also an opportunity to sort of explore that relationship between identity and identity politics and the ways in which that's linked with issues of faith and Catholicism, always placing those in dialogue. I want more of that public dialogue. And I think that as we are fully committed to issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism, that is plural, and it reinforces our understanding of the relationship between the particular and the plural in the sense that makes us all very unique individuals.
Thank you so much. I loved that conversation on the element of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to take a short ad break, but afterward, I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that topic. And welcome back. We are still here with Dean Alexander having an exciting and riveting conversation. Our next question is going to come from Miss Anna.
So we'd love to know, just in light of recent politics, what are your reactions to the new policies regarding DEI and other social justice issues? And also just how do you see LMU or yourself needing to shift certain practices to balance appeasing the federal government and staying in line with LMU's Jesuit values?
You know, there's some craziness going on. And I don't want to spend much time talking about the factors and those individuals who are promoting what is tantamount to racism and bias and exclusion in this country. I think that LMU has taken a very clear stance, and I celebrate it and I reinforce it, that issues of diversity is tantamount to the very nature of who we are as an institution. And so we are not engaged in scrubbing or expunging things from our web pages. We're not renaming things, through some euphemism that would avoid the DEIA references. And then I say DEIA, I'm going to say it again, DEIA, just to kind of reinforce the importance of that language. And not just the language, but the politics and the sentiments and the commitments and the advocacy about bringing multiple voices to the table, multiple ways of seeing and being and knowing oneself in the world, and what that contributes to a community of critical thought. If we are interested in being men, women, people with and for each other in the world, that is plural, that is inclusive, that's about diversity, equity, inclusion. That is an armor against bias. It's a performative resistance against marginalization. And so I think that LMU is embodying its mission of a Jesuit and Marymount institution. And when we talk about LMU, I'm always interested in reinforcing the Jesuit and the Marymount part, the Jesuit and the Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Mary and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange. And it's their charisms, it's their attitudes, beliefs, values, the things that they're most committed to that serves as the foundation for who we are. And the care for, as the Sisters of St. Joseph would say, the care for the good neighbor who is really the other. And we are all other to each other. I'm just looking at this beautiful array of individuals in this room right now. This is a celebration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism, of diverse individuals coming together for a meaningful, critical conversation, a round table of decision-making, if you will, about who we are and who we want to be in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm gonna change the topic a little bit.
Oh no, don't change the topic.
I know, it's crazy. You said something earlier about communication being art and art being communications, and as someone who's a theater major, double communications, I feel the same way. I just wanted to know if you had any favorite performances at LMU.
I'm winking at you and you can't see my wink. The reality is that every new performance is my favorite performance.
Yeah,
right?
that's
and what I mean by that really is, and it's not a cop-out, I could point out some performances that stand out for me, but the reality is when I am in a theater space or a dance space or a art space and gallery, I am completely enthralled and engaged in the moment of that activity. And I'm always interested in how students are interpreting a text, translating a text, inviting audiences to imagine new worlds, new ways of thinking and seeing and knowing and being in the world. And I am fully alive in those moments because I'm enthralled with how they are alive. We have some students here who I have casual conversations with, or hi and bye in the hallway, or they come to visit me for this opportunity or this problem and concern. And I engage those students in those moments. But then I encounter those same students on the stage or on the page or in a debate, and I'm like, who in the hell are you? Right? And that's technical stuff, right? Because something cracks open and that they are fully alive and present. And they are engaged in that intersection between what communication is and can be, and what art is and can be, and the ways in which they're always engaged in this kind of critical aesthetic sharing of knowledge and information. So all the performances are my favorite performances, right. But the students are the ones that enliven the possibilities of both communication and the performing and the fine arts, and teach us lessons about being human.
I have a follow-up question. Is there something that you would want the LMU Theater Department to put on? Like, is there a specific show that you think that should be talked about, that there's a lesson behind there that you think should be shown?
So again, not a cop-out. I think the theater department actually does this phenomenal job of keeping its finger on the pulse of the social, cultural, political issues that are happening in the world, and choosing plays that actually help students to grapple with those issues and invite audiences in. The thing that I would ask more of, if you will, which is not a particular play or a particular production, I would love the theater department to include talkback discussions after every performance.
Yeah.
Right? Those talkbacks that they have sometimes on the first night of a particular show, usually something in the Barnell Theater, small, intimate environment. They crack open the social, cultural, political importance, not only of the play, but of theater as a form, as a laboratory to engage in critical social discussion. Because those are the performances, the performance and then the talkback, where I know that the audience leaves not just thinking about how the aesthetic washed over them and how pleasurable or how funny it was, but those talkback forces audience members to kind of grapple with the real issues. It says, why did I enjoy that? Why was I laughing at that? Why did it feel like a punch in the stomach? You know, and to unpack those affective responses to performance to get to what I think is the meaningful purpose and the potential and the potency of performance. So I would say more of the talk back, where the audience can kind of both ask questions and then truly articulate what it is that they were feeling and their response, even to the point of saying, didn't like that, let me tell you why. And it's the let me tell you why part where people reveal themselves, where people say, because it rubbed against my sensibilities of race, of culture, of gender, of sexuality, of politics, or I saw myself on the stage and I didn't like it. So you forced me to confront a reality that I had been avoiding. And I think that's what theater and performance has the ability to do. More of that, I say.
It was so fantastic to be able to hear you today about your personal journey, your career exploration, and so many things that have contributed to your life and who you are today as our current dean. And I kind of just wanted to hear, what do you think your 21-year-old self would think of you currently, or what advice would you have for a 21-year-old today going into the industry, going out into the world right now?
I feel a tear coming on, right? I honestly and truly believe that my 21-year-old self would be completely in love with the me that I am now. Because my 21-year-old self, I'm gonna cry. I think my 21-year-old self was so unsure, was so uncomfortable, was so, grappling with who I am, what I am, why I am. But the 22-year-old self sort of took a lot of different chances, a lot of exposed myself to a wide variety of other kind of opportunities, and it was always a struggle. And so the person that I am now, who is almost triple to my 21-year-old self, looks back at the struggle and the journey and recognize that it was worth it. People always ask that fantastical question, if you could go back in time, what would you change? I don't like that game. Been there, done that, and I stand by every choice that I made that got me here. Not just me, the Dean of the College of Communication and Fine Arts at Loyola Marymount University. That's good. That's something to celebrate. Not just me with a curriculum vitae or a resume that's quite impressive, but the me who is fully alive in who I am and who I want to be. The me that is comfortable in a wide variety of social, cultural, political locations. The me who stands strong, who walks proudly on campus. The me that doesn't look from side to side to see who's watching or who's evaluating. The me who wakes up in the morning and goes, yeah, I kind of like that guy in the mirror. Right? And I think that it's a matter of trusting instincts. And that's what I'm saying to all of you nearly graduating folk. Trust your instincts, that you're not only going to do the things that you want to do, but the things that you need to do to be true to yourself. And there's a way in which these things actually come together. They click. You almost hear it at some point. You're going to hear it. I'm not sure if it's at 21 or 22 or 25 or 30, but something clicks into place and you go, oh, there it is, right? And it's not just in your head. It's in your heart. It's in your stomach. It's the way you walk and move in the world. It's that sense of apprehension that you carried with you for so many years that you didn't know how and when it was going to happen, and all of a sudden you're like completely free and you're walking with a level of confidence about who you are and who you want to be and what you mean to others. I don't want to lose that part. This notion of being people, men and women with and for others is real. So yeah, I'm thinking about that boy who became this man, this very particular person in the world. And I would turn back to him. This feels like an episode of RuPaul, right? Where they're looking at a picture of a 10-year-old version of myself. The reality is that I would nod to him. And I would literally say, it gets better. And I would literally say, trust your instincts and you're gonna be fine.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Dean Alexander. I know I have had a great time. I'm assuming we all had a great time.
We did.
Like I said, we thank you for joining us. This is The Rotation. I'm your co-host, Jordan.
And I'm Rainey.
Thank you for rolling the last one with us.